Good evening, and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 807 for the 5th of July, 2021. Hope you had a good 4th of July weekend. A lot of folks had the day off today, but we're not taking the day off. We are here working for you. I think that's our slogan at the station here. We're working for you. But let's get everybody on the show here, get the embed code going. For those that don't know, this is the pre-show. This is this magical time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say outrageous things. So let's get everybody invited and get this party started here. I think Troy is out tonight. Hopefully everybody else will be around. I know a lot of folks did take the day off for a 3-day weekend. I think Bill Murray is back with us this week. He was out last week. And let's see who we can find. Okay, everybody's been invited, so get this thing going here. Got a tropical storm over Cuba this evening, Elsa. Thankfully, the lame Elsa jokes kind of died down after about the first week, or maybe the first 3 or 4 days. They were funny for about the first hour, I think. Maybe the first 30 minutes. Then it got pretty old. So we've got that going on. That'll be kind of sideswiping the west coast of Florida tomorrow. Tampa Bay, and then coming up around Cedar Key. And where I happen to be, we're going to be on the good side of the system. Oh, Mr. Murray is in an undisclosed location this evening.
Part of my witness protection program.
Yes. So is that trying to figure out, what is that? Is that a shower curtain, or is that?
That's an interesting feature of a Home 2, which is a Hilton product, and it separates the living area from the bedroom. And when Elle gets back from dinner with her sister, I thought that would be nice and convenient that they could, or she could, sit over there and watch television without us seeing her. Nothing.
Without hearing us yakking away about nothing.
And she's got to put up with that for 2 hours. And that's about all your ears can stand.
So what do you want to disclose the state you're in, or is that a secret location here?
The Tar Heel State.
Oh.
Coming back from Annapolis, Maryland, which was a fun little mini vacation.
I think I stayed at one of those Home 2s one time. Isn't there one in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, there's probably 450 of them now. So they're becoming more ubiquitous.
I don't know why. It was some event I don't know. That's very odd for me to spend the night in Tuscaloosa, but there was something I had to do late one night and had to do something early the next morning, and I just stayed in Tuscaloosa, and it was at the Home 2.
Yeah, I think it's right there off Greensboro, maybe.
Yeah, it's right there, kind of above the river, downtown. But as I recall, it was nice. As I recall, they had a waffle maker.
They're all relatively new, and they do have a waffle maker. That is a true statement. I need Nate. If we need Nate back tonight, he needs to come back because I'm in his neighborhood.
He should.
I need to know where to go for brunch tomorrow.
Jen, how are you?
I'm good. A little sleepy today, but I'm hanging in there. Getting back to it.
Jen's going to do the live 10 o'clock update on Tropical Storm Elsa right here on the show.
I'm not doing that live. I'm going to do my 12 seconds with the spot in the weather bed. That's what I'm doing. Now I just want to make sure I have an update.
In 12 seconds.
It's hard. I'm just trying to get the highlights. It's hard when you don't know exactly. It's Tallahassee is the one I'm most concerned about, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm doing good.
Let's see if we get.
Do you have a station in Tampa?
Not Tampa. I have Panama City and Tallahassee and Pensacola. So I'm more north Panhandle.
You're good.
Yeah. I think it'll zoom through pretty quick.
Yeah, the folks in Panama City are still a little gun shy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some knucklehead that was writing for some newspaper down there. I thought it was a journalist. So this could be a category 2 or a category 3, and it could greatly affect us. And I'm thinking, what is this? And
No.
And it turned out it was some weather guy. I mean, maybe he's got the scoop of the century. I mean, I'm not going to mock him.
Yeah, wait till Thursday.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I've learned that a long time ago. You don't go criticizing anybody at this stage of the game, because who knows?
That's a good point.
I'm thinking, that's probably a little, for these people that have been through so much, they really don't need to be hearing that.
No.
It's just, we live in a strange world, and they will flock to that. And it doesn't matter if they're wrong. People just flock to that. I mean, this whole thing needs to be a social science study. The more doom, the more gloom, people will follow you. And they're not going to listen to any professional. They're not going to listen to the Hurricane Center. It's some knucklehead that comes up with an outrageous doomsday forecast. Ooh, I got to follow that and share that. Mm-hmm. And when they're wrong, they don't seem to care. And it's like they just stay with penalty. Them. No, and it likes become a religion or something. I mean, it's very strange. I mean, if you look at Florida and the social media accounts, who's got the biggest numbers? It's not any professional. It's amateur players. The professionals are just dwarfed by these people. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and if I got one more text that said trending west ? This week, I just want to throw my phone against the wall.
Well, if you do it, be sure and get some video so we can show it.
Yeah, that would be worth it, wouldn't it?
I love people pitching a hissy fit, especially if it's somebody we know and love.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
You must be in the Weather Museum, or you have a really cool background.
I'm in the Weather Museum.
There you go, James. Look at that. Some cool stuff, James. That's James Spann's garage back there.
I am a weather museum. When you hit a certain age, you just kind of become one, I mean, it's like...
oh man, that should be the show title. That's already. Can we do that before the show starts? That's fantastic.
No. You cannot take a show title before the show starts.
I figure out how to work that in, Jen.
I will do our best here.
That's Aubrey.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Hey, Aubrey.
All right. Well, let's get this thing started here. It's we are 4 minutes late. We're never 4 minutes late anymore. All right.
Because you keep trending later and later with the invites.
Exactly. Yeah, it's my fault. I got a knucklehead son that's moving and had to deal with some of his stuff. All right, here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains episode number 807. 807. This is for the 5th of July, not the 4th, but the 5th of July, 2021. And we are glad you are with us. And where a lot of folks are coming off a long 3-day weekend here. Aubrey, did you have a 3-day weekend? Apparently not, because you're in your dress uniform tonight.
Well, I did, actually. I took Friday off.
Oh, so okay.
Fridays are more exciting around here than Mondays.
So how was it? Tell us, for those of us that did not get the 3-day weekend.
Friday was a beautiful, beautiful day. In fact, so I'm always in a dress. I always wear dresses at work. I usually wear dresses out. I get, I'm a little warm natured, so I like to be comfortable in a dress. I actually wore pants on Friday night and Saturday night because it dropped into the 60s in the evening. It was beautiful here. Highs were in the 70s on both Friday and Saturday. So it was fantastic and a great weekend. And now we're looking at low to mid 90s over the next 2 days.
That's the way it works. We actually had people with blankets watching fireworks displays Friday night and Saturday night, which that doesn't happen at this latitude that often on the 4th of July. Just amazing. I think the lowest temperature I saw down here was 53. And that was up in the northeastern corner of the state. Jen, how cool were you during this little cool snap?
Yeah, we got down into the 50s, and may have even had a few upper 40s out there too. But I think we stayed in the 50s, and got hot again this weekend. But yeah, we had a really nice span of weather for the 4th, and got to see some fireworks out in the distance from my mom's property. She has 5 acres because she has horses, and so you can see for miles. So we were able to see a lot of the fireworks from her house, which was awesome.
Awesome. Well, Bill Murray, you're back. You were,
Yeah, I'm back.
was it 50-cent beer night last week at Hooters? What was going on?
No, I was driving last week, about the same location. Now I'm driving back the other way, so it's been a long week. But I did get to see the fireworks in Annapolis, which is a cool place to see fireworks, and they were really, really good. Annapolis is a really fun town. I enjoyed that a lot. And they were sort of reeling from an accident. Well, it wasn't accidental. It was, people shooting each other in the street. Hit a lady on the balcony of a hotel just 2 doors down from us. She was there delivering her son to the Naval Academy for his freshman year, and it was just kind of heartbreaking to see that. That put sort of a pall on things a little bit, but. And a lot of thoughts go out and prayers go out to that family for their loss in a really bad situation. But on a happier note, tonight our guest WeatherBrain is a research meteorologist at the NOAA National Severe Storms Laboratory, where she specializes in collecting observations in the lowest levels of the atmosphere. In her free time, she volunteers at the National Weather Museum and Science Center in Norman. And Elizabeth Smith, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're so thrilled you're here, and so much to unpack. There's a lot to know about you, Elizabeth. So get ready. I think we had like a 5-minute conversation on Friday, but I wasn't going to tip you off that you were going to be in the hot seat for a long time tonight. So we're going to start with the obligatory question: how'd you get interested in weather?
Yeah. So I originally was born and raised in West Virginia. That's where I spent the first, 18 years of my life. So very, very different weather than we have here in the great state of Oklahoma. You're going to hear some sounds in the background. It's a big building here at the Weather Museum. But I spent a lot of time there actually being afraid of the weather, which is a little bit funny for West Virginia. There's not usually quite as extreme weather there, but thunder and lightning was very scary to me. I watched the Wizard of Oz quite early in that tornado scene. It is quite realistic for its time, even quite realistic for the 90s when I was watching it as a small child. And it was very scary to me. And thankfully I had a family friend that bought me little children's books, like the cardboard books about storms and tornadoes. And so that fear turned into curiosity. And ever since then, I've been very, very curious. And thankfully, I had the means and the support from my family to explore that. And that's led me on a long road that eventually landed me here in Norman at the University of Oklahoma, and eventually to the National Severe Storms Lab, doing what is very much a dream job. So it's pretty cool.
All right. So here's a trick question, Elizabeth. Who's the most famous person to ever come out of West Virginia?
Chuck Yeager.
Nick Saban. That was a trick question and you failed.
Oh, brother.
So now, all right, now, Elizabeth, tell us about a little more about your hometown. You mentioned it went through a tough disaster in 2016, didn't it?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Clendenin, West Virginia, which is about 20 miles north of Charleston, the capital city. And back in 2016, it wasn't particularly severe weather. It was just training thunderstorms. So it was rain, but rain for several hours, stratiform, continued rain. And West Virginia's got a lot of terrain, right? So it's mountainous, and floodwaters just kept rushing off the hills, the ground saturated. And I grew up along a river. The Elk River comes through there. Lots of creeks are tributaries into the Elk River. And we've had floods. 1997 was a historic flood year. But the floods in 2016 were absolutely historic. There were unfortunately, lives lost. But the town of Clendenin was completely inundated. The high school that I graduated from, Herbert Hoover High School, was destroyed. So the high school students are still actually going to high school in trailers, mobile classrooms. They finally have broken ground and are starting to build a new school for them. I think the elementary school was also destroyed. Most businesses in the town were completely destroyed. And it's unfortunate there too, because the town was already quite small and only had one grocery store, and it chose not to reopen. And so now there's not even a grocery store for those people to go to. So it's a hard time. It's definitely a hard time for that area. And they weren't the only ones hit. There were lots of other towns like that across the state at that time.
Yeah, it was a really terrible flood. I remember it being unprecedented in a lot of ways, for sure. Now, second trick question, what's your favorite food at the Clendenin Dairy Queen and why?
So the Clendenin Dairy Queen, I don't know how they got away with being a Dairy Queen franchise. I really don't. They barely served any Dairy Queen food at all. But a hot dog in West Virginia is very specific, and we're kind of between the north and the south. It's territorially interesting because with the mountains being there, it's very cut off from the north as far as culture, but spatially it's not really in the south. But a lot of the culture is still quite southern. And so people assume that we have northern hot dogs, right? So relish and whatever else you put on a hot dog in the north. But a West Virginia hot dog is very specifically in this area of West Virginia, ketchup, mustard, onions, chili, and the chili is very, very specific. It's hard to make, but I've finally figured it out. I'm very proud of this accomplishment in my life. Like, forget the PhD, this chili. And then a cream-based sweet slaw, and then salt and pepper on top. And it's in that order, and you have to have it like perfectly soggy white bread bun, and it's all smashed together. And it is like a local delicacy. And so the flood, unfortunately, took that Dairy Queen. And so now it's a like big crusade to try to perfect the recipe that was lost when that Dairy Queen was lost.
Well, James, I thought we were going to have a road trip and have a Clendenin Dairy Queen hot dog. It was sounding awfully attractive there till it blew away, till it floated away. So
I'm all in.
I saw another store on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, or I guess I said that right. Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, I suppose. The guy from Flavortown, from your place, Jim, who went to a hot dog place in West Virginia that's pretty famous. Have you heard of that place, Elizabeth, or is it?
Yeah. I think it's the one that's along like the West Virginia-Ohio border. Can't think of the name of it.
Sounds close to you, Jen.
Yeah, we have to find that. Cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is it too late to turn right and head to West Virginia? Because this is sounding awfully tasty here. So now your undergraduate was at Cal University of Pennsylvania, but how many people, this is, I guess, the third trick question, Elizabeth, how many people would think if you just told them that you graduated from Cal that you went to school on the West Coast?
Everyone.
No doubt about that. Everyone who didn't either know Susan Jasko or was affiliated with the university in some way. So talk about your time there and why that was special.
Yeah, so I actually was at Cal U when Susan Jasko was there. We overlapped. So I know her. We overlapped for many years. But yeah, so Cal U was a good experience for me because it was close-ish to home. However, I will say that moving, across that line, to the north to Pennsylvania was a much larger culture shock than moving this far to Oklahoma. That was interesting. But it was a very nice experience for me because it was a small program. And so, I ended up graduating in a class of 4. So me and 3 other people. That was my senior class at Cal U for meteorology. And, for meteorology, you have to take all of those calculus classes, all of those physics classes, and then those upper level meteorology classes can sometimes be, quite intense. And you benefit from being able to spend all of that time really breaking down those problems and having those, fine discussions about how the different parts from those different classes all come together in the end. And since there were, 4 to sometimes 6 of us, if the semesters were off and we had a couple juniors in there, we got the opportunity to just do that because it was a conversation. every class was just a conversation instead of 30 of us in a room just trying to score enough points to pass. So I received an absolutely stellar education from that place, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because when I came out here to Oklahoma for graduate school, and there are 100 graduate students even out here, I had such a different experience than those students, and I was prepared in a very different way, and I think that it benefits me every day.
Now, that really sounds like a sales pitch for the program there. I mean, that sounds attractive to a lot of people who might find that really accommodating.
And it's affordable, right? It's a small school, so it's much more affordable than some of those big tuitions. But I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and I still got all of those opportunities, to do research and be involved in all of the big names. So the AMS, the NWA, all of those things. We were there. We were always there. We were just as involved as all of the big name universities too. So I don't feel like I missed out on anything from having to go to college.
Well, maybe you got more opportunities because you probably didn't have a place to hide in a smaller group like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to 10 years ago, Elizabeth, now that you're past 10 years in the field, and what would you say to yourself back then?
Probably read your textbooks. So spend a bit more time actually just enjoying your classes instead of being overwhelmed. If I could go back and take all my classes over again, I would just spend more time enjoying them. There's just so much that you could have learned if you weren't overwhelmed and worried about the grade. The grade, it doesn't actually matter all that much. I mean, of course it matters. You need to pass and have the GPA that you need to get to whatever the next step it is that you want to take. But what really matters is what you get out of the class. And if you're just too worried about all of those things, you're missing the part that matters, which is the actual content and the experience that you have in that classroom. And I know that I was guilty of that for sure in my first few years. And that is a big regret for me. So, because I was chasing, the perfect score every time, and that's all that I was worried about. And I could have benefited more from just focusing on the content and learning the way that I needed to learn to just learn the content, regardless of what the score was. I wish I would have done that. So it took me till like the third year of graduate school to figure that out, which is a shame. But so that would be one item of advice. The other item of advice I would give me is just to talk to people that are in seats like mine now. I've gotten old enough now that I realize that like first and second year students, or like high school students that are considering to go to college, are now scared of me because I'm at the National Severe Storms Laboratory. And that sounds really, important and fancy. And so I'm scary, I guess. And actually I'm not scary at all. I get up and put on my shoes, and sometimes I oversleep my alarm, and I'm not very good at making coffee. Like, I'm a very normal person. So I just think that we could all do a little bit better of being more human, so that those people can approach us and realize that, we're all people too, and have those open conversations that could lead to more mentorship of the next generation.
Aubrey Urbanowicz, she doesn't look very scary to me. What do you think?
Not scary at all, but I get what she's saying. Some people they do get intimidated, in certain things. And I think for a lot of us, we just have to realize that everyone goes through, your own struggles, your own issues and stuff, even though it might not seem like it on the outside. We're all just normal, regular people. So no reason to be intimidated. And I bet if you came up to one of us, you might actually be pleased.
There you go. So that's really good advice right there, Elizabeth. Tell us about the time you did get to spend with Dr. Susan Jasko. We think a lot of her on the show.
Yeah, so we overlap. We're different programs. At that time, she was in the communications program, but she did, do work in the same space as us. And so, we would spend time together at conferences and, discussing some of the, common problems about how, the public responds to messaging and these types of things. And so it was always really interesting to be able to get her perspective on problems that we were just discussing as we were learning. And that was a benefit to us in the classroom and, even in those conference settings, to just have a very different perspective than you would get from, your professors of meteorology, for example, or the scientists giving the talks, because, at that time it was like 2011 or whatever, that was still fairly new to a lot of the scientists at those conferences. It wasn't talked about quite as widely as it is now. And so I think that was something else that was at Cal that was very beneficial, just a different kind of edge to our education, was just kind of having her around, kind of talking about those things. And she brought in some people even to, present to us at some points. So that was pretty cool too.
Talk about the Hollings program and how important that was to you, and why students should not sleep on the idea of being part of that.
Yeah, so the Hollings program, I would say, absolutely changed my life. And I didn't know it at the time, but now that I look back on it, without that program, I would not be where I am now. It very much set the course for the rest of my trajectory at that time. So it's kind of scary to think about that, 19-year-old me put in an application, and then that set the path for the rest of my career so far. But that's how that worked out. So the Hollings program is put on by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, so NOAA, and it's through the NOAA Education Office. And what it is it's an educational program that is a scholarship. And in addition to being a scholarship, it also includes between the 2 years of scholarship, a paid 10-week internship experience at any NOAA research institution or NOAA science office. So for me, I did it at National Weather Service office, but Hollings also includes people that are affiliated with wildlife and fisheries, oceans, any of those things. So one, it's an excellent scholarship. I come from a blue collar family. Paying for college was not easy for me. I was doing it, on my own outside of what scholarships I had already. And so having the Hollings scholarship was what allowed me to be able to focus on my studies and not have to work additional jobs. So that is a life changer in of its own, because that's when I got that scholarship for the last 2 years of my studies. And that means when I was in, dynamics, mesoscale, and all those harder classes, I didn't have to work an additional part-time job to try to pay for my rent. So that's a big deal in of itself. But I went and did my internship and really got to experience research and also experience the operational setting on a National Weather Service floor. And I thought I wanted to be a National Weather Service forecaster. And I learned during that summer that I do not. I absolutely do not want to be a National Weather Service forecaster. It's just not for me. And that's an excellent thing to learn. I'm not a deterministic decision maker. It's just not who I am. And if I hadn't known that, I probably would have moved ahead and applied and taken one of those jobs and then hated it. That would not be a good experience for anybody. So that was a great thing. But the other great thing about Hollings is it also has programming where it takes you to NOAA headquarters, and it introduces you to all of the line offices and how OAR, being the research branch of NOAA, works, and just how NOAA works at large. And you get to see all of those inner workings and meet all of the other Hollings students, and it becomes this kind of community of people, and you have these loose contacts to people, but mostly you just really understand how NOAA works. And so NOAA is just always in your head from that. And since then, I guess it's just been cooking in the brain. And so when I got to graduate school and there started to be these kind of NOAA opportunities, I understood them right away. I was like, oh yes, the mission. I know what this is, and I know how to apply this immediately. And it was very easy for me to just slide in to work that applied that way. I really understood why we needed to do that, why that work was important, because I'd already had that exposure to mission-oriented work. And now here I am, a NOAA employee, and I love my job. So yeah, very important. So you apply for Hollings, usually in your sophomore year, you would apply. So definitely check it out. It is an amazing, amazing opportunity. There's also a program, it's called the EPP program, that runs parallel to Hollings, that can be beneficial to minoritized communities, people at historically Black colleges, tribal colleges and universities. So definitely check that program out as well.
Elizabeth, I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to actually speak at CalU. One of my chipmunks from Tornado Talk, Nick Wilkes, is a student there now, and he's majoring in GIS, and then he's minoring in meteorology. So he invited me a couple of years ago to speak to the Met group, and I loved everybody. It's a small group, but big hearts and big dreams to learn and grow. And I do like the smaller setting. I mean, I came from Penn State, which is not small. It's a humongous, I went to a branch campus, but even that was huge. And so being able to go to a smaller school, and he had me just come and talk about my career and Tornado Talk and all these different things. So it was just a really neat opportunity. So I think it's cool that you came from that school, and Nick is enjoying being a student there. And I think just, it's an encouragement to see how far you've come. And it's an encouragement to those who are there and those who are about to move into, going to school there. It's a really good focus group. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because I did the opposite. So I took a minor in GIS, because all of those programs were, especially at the time, really closely connected. And you see the value of these other options because you have the time to get to know a lot of faculty outside your own. And so I picked up the minor in GIS because I was like, wow, this is really valuable science, and these tools are really useful. And that ended up setting like really a lot of the basis for some of the work I still do today. I really understand a lot more about, spatial variability and context to the work that I do now. And I wouldn't have known that had I not gone to a school like Cal, where I was just exposed to that by chance because it was down the hall. So I really, really think that that's neat, how all of that interdisciplinary stuff is kind of built in, and you have the option to do it at a small program like Cal because the community is there. So yeah, it's great.
What other type of skills do you think, because we're learning as, we get out, from even when I was at school, it was all about meteorology, but now it seems like you need to have more than just weather. You need to have other types of skills. What are some other things that you would encourage students to kind of pursue to help make them more well-rounded for the workforce?
So, people always talk about those, hard skills, so things like communication or coding and things like this, but I would say communication is definitely the one that anybody can work on regardless of the resources at hand. So a lot of times, coding, you can't always work on it if you don't have, equitable access to, computers with enough ability to do that and things like this. If you do, great, but if you don't, communication is something you can work on every day. And communication is a well-rounded skill in of itself. So written communication, spoken communication, and then also communication to different groups. So, we talk about educational outreach, but education is also to, adults. It's to adults, it's to your peers, it's to other scientists, it's of course to K through 12, it's to all of these things. And so being a good scientist and a scientist that can really excel, and a student that can really stand out in the crowd would be a student that can communicate well like an empathetic human. And what that comes down to is very effective communication, because deep down, assuming that you are a person that has empathy, we are all empathetic humans that are able to on some level understand each other's plight in life. The problem is that we're not able to always communicate it very well, and specifically in scientific communities, it oftentimes gets really stereotyped out that it's cold and it's nerdy and there's all of this distance between people, and that's really not true. It is really not true. Some of the scientists I worked with are some of the most kind, outreaching, tender people that I've ever known in my entire life. but it's because they are those well-rounded, effective communicators that are able to not only communicate their own stance, but also help other people communicate to them. And that's effective in their work every day, but then it's also effective like when you're out in the field trying to do your work. You know, you interact with people every day when you're trying to do that. It's effective when you're trying to communicate with your professor when something is hard and frustrating. It's very effective when you have a group member that won't show up to do their work on a group project in class, all of these things. So communication, communication, communication. You know, you can take classes in it, you can read about it, you can, you know, go to the library and just like join groups and spend time talking with people that just aren't like you, just to learn to talk more with different types of people, and, you know, practice written word, you know, do all of these things, because anybody can learn to be a better communicator.
And that's outstanding, Jen. Great line of talk there. That's awesome. You did a little television for a while, Elizabeth. Tell us about that experience. And you kind of roll your eyes, like, was that like a weather service experience where you said, I don't want to do this either?
Yeah. So I, you know, I grew up in West Virginia, and I grew up watching the same chief meteorologist the whole, you know, way through. He's still there. Shout out to Spencer Atkins, Channel 13.
Yeah, Spencer's been on the show.
Yeah. Spencer's great.
Spencer, yeah.
It's kind of a big deal.
He is a big deal. He is Mr. West Virginia.
Yes. So Spencer, you know, he had come to my elementary school when I was a kid. Actually, it's funny. A guy that now works with him in the broadcast studio was a couple years behind me in school, and he like went at this Halloween as Spencer when we were in school together, which was funny. You should look at that picture. It's hilarious. His name is Joseph Fitzwater. It's when Joseph was a kid, and he's dressed as Spencer, and now he is Spencer's co-worker, like in the studio. He does weather with him. It's just funny. I don't know how Spencer deals with that emotionally, but he does. But so Spencer had come to my elementary school, and then when I was in high school, he came and, you know, talked to me at some point about, you know, wanting to be a meteorologist and things like this. And so between my freshman and sophomore year, I believe it was, I, you know, didn't really have an internship or anything lined up, and that was something that I knew meteorologists could do. And I was like, oh, maybe I should try this. And so I reached out to him, and he said yes. And so I spent the summer working with him, and yeah, I was bad at that. That was also not my skill set. I helped him like build the graphics, and I ended up helping him build graphics and, you know, working like the you know, chat system and the crawler systems and all of that, because being on the air was not my skill set. So again, learned things that I was not good at, which is an important thing. But Spencer and I stay in contact. He's came out here a couple times for conferences and work things, and, you know, we always meet up when he's here. So it's nice. But.
Yeah. So James, how do you feel about being like the #3 Halloween costume person every year for sub 6th graders in Alabama? Suspenders, you know, you better get them in early September. You're not going to have brow line.
You know, I just say I get a lot of free candy. That's all I can say. You know what? I dress up as me and just knock on some doors, and I get whatever I want. It's great. That's
an adorable costume you have there, young man. You
look like James Spann. You even look old.
Yeah, I don't think you were here, Elizabeth, for the show title, which was in the out of bounds department, because it can't come before the show starts. James said that his exact statement was, "I am a weather museum." So now that I've said that, maybe it'll get to be the show title tonight.
Now it's legal.
Yeah, now it's inbound, so we can work it. So talk for a minute about your master's and PhD experiences, and how that came about and how it went.
Yeah, so you know, I applied to graduate school, which is a whole process that, as a, you know, person that was raised in a blue collar family, I had never really heard of that. So if you've never heard about applying to graduate school in the field of meteorology, you actually, for the most part, get paid to go to graduate school. You do not pay tuition to go to graduate school, and you earn a stipend to live to go to graduate school. So Just want to put that out there because I
On
did
a
not
graduate
know
school.
that.
A long time ago.
What have we been doing?
I missed out.
So just a fun fact out there for anybody that's considering that. It makes it competitive because that was just a shocking thing for me to learn. So went through the application process, and it's always very strange. Being on the other side now, I understand more about it because it has to do with how different grants are funded and who has money at what university and whatever. But I applied to like a couple big schools, and then I applied to some smaller or mid-sized schools because I thought that would be how like competitive it would be. I assumed that was, a one-to-one relation of how likely you would get in. So I applied to like 6 or 7 schools, I don't even remember. And I got rejected to all of them except OU. And that was a very interesting experience because I started getting rejected from all of these schools. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to graduate school, that's that. And then suddenly I'm just accepted to the University of Oklahoma, which just didn't make any sense. And so, I talk about this because I think that talking about rejection is very important. People, we all get rejected. This is very real. But also it's not a one-to-one process, which is also something I didn't know. So it very much just has to do with where different universities have grant money to support students. And OU had gotten a lot of grant money to support students for a big field project called Pecan, which was planes elevated convection at night. So all of my graduate study, which was actually a combined master's and PhD, I did a direct track, so I kind of skipped the master's in theory, was focused on that campaign. And so after my first year of graduate school, I was sent out to the plains, so Kansas, Nebraska, mostly, a little bit of Iowa in there, and we did nocturnal field work. So our day would start at 11 a.m. and end at about 4 a.m. the next day. And we would go study nocturnal thunderstorms with all of our instrumentation. And what I was studying specifically was the nocturnal low-level jet that forms out here in the Great Plains pretty commonly. So, about 300 to 500 meters above the surface, particularly in the summer, but almost all year. We commonly have very, very strong winds over the surface out here. And so when storms were not formed or they hadn't arrived yet, it gave an opportunity for us to collect observations on the nocturnal low-level jet. And so those data that we collected over those long, long, long nights were the data that formed the basis for my PhD work. So 4.5 years later, I graduated with a PhD, and now here I am. So it was a hard 4.5 years, a lot of hard classes. That's very fast for a PhD. So a lot of classes really fast, and then a lot of writing really fast, but we got it done.
Talk about why the jet occurs at night across the plains like that. Tell us why that is.
So the plains are flat. When you and I stand on the plains, they're flat. They're actually not flat, they're sloped. So if you're standing on the flat part of Kansas, out west, you're standing on a higher elevation surface than if you were standing on the flat part of Kansas somewhere near Kansas City. So they are sloped. They're flat, but they're on an angle. And so this angle sets up a very interesting temperature structure. So during the day, the sun can heat the surface, and so the surface gets hot. And since the surface is sloped, what that means is that out west, since the surface is at a higher elevation and it's hot, the air at that elevation is hot to the west, but the air at that same height is cold because it's higher, farther away from the surface in the east because the land surface is lower. So if you took like a constant height line, since the land surface drops away to the east, you get basically a temperature gradient from west to east because the land surface is hot out to the west, right? So then at night, the opposite happens, right? So the surface cools down pretty rapidly, but the air up above the surface in Kansas City, it takes longer to cool down than the surface does out in West Kansas. So now you've got a cold surface, but you still have sort of warm air. So your temperature gradient rapidly worsens. So this is a very simplified explanation of how those temperature gradients can set up. But these are basically the background conditions that can lead to this strengthened southerly flow. And that can form the background basis for southerly low level jets that form over the Great Plains. And that's why they're unique to this part of the country. You can have strong jets that form along coasts, form along, fronts, things like this through, convergence. And those are still jets, but they're different than the Great Plains nocturnal low level jet because that sloped business isn't involved. There's also the inertial oscillation process that's in here. It has to do with geostrophic wind, how it oscillates, that a geostrophic wind oscillates around the geostrophic wind vector. And when they come into phase, they move together, but without being able to draw big diagrams. That was really hard to explain. But all of these things come together. What my PhD showed is that we kind of assume that that process, the wind that is driven by that process, is kind of like happening everywhere at once in the same way. The forcing is equivalent everywhere. But what my PhD has helped us see is that the low level jet itself, that flow mechanism, is actually moving in time. And so the low level jet forms earlier and is stronger in the western plains. And then, it's blowing from south to north, but it then kind of, the whole thing, as it's blowing from south to north, continues to blow from south to north. But the strongest part of it kind of slides down the slope overnight, which is interesting. And it's significant because as it's doing that, it can form these little local convergence regions on its edges and in local differences when it's doing that. And those can be really important for nocturnal convection initiation, which is really poorly forecast. And, we oftentimes miss it in our numerical models and things like this. And when we're in these really marginal cases where you're not sure if convection will happen or not, the convergence that happens in these cases can be the difference between a busted forecast or a successful forecast. So we're trying to learn more about the mechanisms behind why or where these convergence pockets happen when they do. But yes.
So when you get through solving that, maybe you can come and help James solve summertime convection in the southeastern United States.
Air mass convection. Air mass convection. That's the next project.
Yeah, so boundary layer science, which is what I do, actually is very much related to that because, air mass convection is related to these, turbulent plumes that bubble up and they feel random. They really do feel random. And we're starting to be able to observe and therefore simulate on those scales. So maybe one day,
One day.
So why do we care so much about the boundary layer, Elizabeth? What's the reason?
Well, we live in it. So for most people that are not like us and, think about the weather all the time, their perception of what the atmosphere is actually is the boundary layer. So, the wind that blows, the air temperature they feel, all of those things, how you feel that the weather is different here than it is wherever you go on vacation. You're like, oh, it's warmer here than it is there. All of those differences, that's actually the boundary layer. And so it is actually very important because it's where we live most of our lives. It's also where we have the most effect on the atmosphere, right? So we are changing the surface of the earth. We are emitting, pollutants from the surface into the atmosphere. All of that stuff is happening in the boundary layer. And so if we don't understand the boundary layer, it's hard to really understand any of those things. We also are now, moving toward a lot more renewable energy sources. So solar energy panels and wind turbines, all these things. Those are also all in the boundary layer. So if we're going to do those things efficiently, we need to understand how the boundary layer is functioning in order to use them most efficiently. So it's very, very important and unfortunately under-observed, which is kind of ironic since this is where we are. But we have, our surface measurements. We have ASOS stations or maybe a mesonet, like here in Oklahoma, we're very fortunate to have the Oklahoma mesonet, whatever surface network you might be familiar with. So we have those. We have weather radar. Of course, if you're any distance away from a weather radar, it's up pretty high already. So it's pretty much exited the boundary layer. We do release weather balloons, and they do fly through the boundary layer, but only twice a day. And yeah, that's it. We have satellites. They look down and they can see the boundary layer, but it's pretty coarse. And if there's a single cloud in the sky, they can't see below the cloud. So there's a massive gap in the boundary layer that is not commonly observed. So for all intents and purposes, we oftentimes don't actually know. I mean, if you want to use the word know, we do know, but we don't know by observing what's going on in the boundary layer because we're not observing it. And that's a big problem as we're moving toward, forecast models that are on finer and finer scales.
Talk about the CLAMPS program for a second and what it is.
So I actually have a baby clamps right behind me. So if you're able to see the program, you can see baby clamps right here. We love baby clamps. We sing a baby clamp song about baby clamps all the time.
You have to describe. You have to behind it there. I thought that was like perspective.
Yeah.
Y'all got to describe it because most people listen to this.
Yeah.
Hey, Elizabeth, describe it because most people listen.
So clamps in real life is a 22-foot long white trailer. Might look like a motorcycle trailer. Our model that we have here is to scale. It is to scale, but it's a much smaller version. It's about 2 feet long. So white trailer that looks maybe like a motorcycle trailer, something like this. And what we do with this is we tow it behind a pickup truck. And we have 3 main instruments on board. So the 3 instruments on board are a Doppler Lidar, a microwave radiometer, and an atmospheric emitted radiance interferometer, which is word soup. So I understand that none of that sounds very interesting, but actually what they do is very interesting. And the fact that they're on board this 22-foot trailer means that we could take them anywhere we need to collect the data that we need to learn more things about the atmosphere. Also, fun fact, for the last 4 or 5 years, we have 2 of these clamp systems, and at least one of them has been deployed in northern Alabama for the cold season. So they've been hanging out there, Coleman or Scottsboro. That's where they've been from like February to May, pretty much. So the first instrument on board clamps is a Doppler Lidar. So if you're familiar with Doppler radar, the concept is generally the same, but it uses Lidar is laser. So LI means laser light instead of radar meaning radio. So laser light detection and ranging. So you shoot out a laser. Our laser is a small wavelength, therefore it is not visible. So kids, when they come to see clamps, are always really disappointed about this. Our laser, you can't see it, doesn't make any pew pew noises. So sad, but our laser goes out, it hits small particles called aerosol, scatters off of the aerosol, and we're detecting the Doppler shift caused by the motion of these aerosol. So what that means is we are using, the same way that a Doppler radar would work in clear air. We are working in clear air, but we are very sensitive to clear air, and we get very, very high resolution information about motion in the atmosphere. So depending on how we scan, we can get horizontal wind updates every 30 seconds. So 30-second profile of horizontal wind. Or if we point it vertically, we can get information about the vertical velocity in the atmosphere every 1.5 seconds. And when we do that, we can then do calculations on that turn into turbulence information that let us understand some of those big plumes, like I was mentioning about the air mass thunderstorms. So how the boundary layer turns over, why it bubbles, and sometimes why you see a cumulus cloud here, but not here, or why you see an air mass thunderstorm over here, but not over here. All of that sort of information. So that's what the Doppler Lidar does. And so it's critical for us to understand the flow in the boundary layer. The other 2, so the atmospheric emitted radiance interferometer, or we call it ARI for short, because no one ever wants to say that, and the microwave radiometer, they work the same way. One of them is just in the infrared, and one of them is in the microwave. But what they are is essentially very, very, very sensitive detectors. So they're passive instruments. They're not sending anything out. They're just listening. And what they're measuring is the downwelling radiance from our atmosphere. So they are just feeling for how the atmosphere is radiating down to the surface, the same way that a satellite might measure that from the Earth. And we can take that spectral radiance measurement and we put it through a retrieval, and we can use that information to get very high temporal resolution profiles of temperature and moisture every 5 minutes in the boundary layer. So what all of this means is we can get similar information from the clamps trailers that a radiosonde or a weather balloon might provide, but we could do it every couple minutes instead of every hour if you were doing it for research, or every, twice a day. So these instruments are incredible for research. They're also very expensive. One of these costs quite near $1 million. So this is not a solution to only having twice a day balloons, but it is really, 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 really beneficial for boundary layer research. And we're using it right now. I am using it right now from some of that data that I mentioned that we've collected in Northern Alabama to look at things like the early spring severe weather that happens in the southeastern United States, and try to understand what's happening in the boundary layer in that part of the country before severe convection occurs.
Any interesting tidbits you can share with us about what you've learned?
So far, what we're doing is we've been taking all of the years that we've sat there, because we've done it for several years now, and we're trying to combine all of those years together to understand statistically what might be different in between these cases, instead of just looking from case to case to case, because other people have been doing that for a long time. And so we thought, okay, maybe let's take a different approach. So what we've started to see is that the different modes of convection, so discrete convection, so individual storms, linear convection, so when you have your cold front, or whatever your front coming through is, you have your line of storms, or the mixed mode, so you have your linear mode, but you have those discrete supercellular looking storms within your linear system. Between those three modes, there are some differences in how the boundary layer appears to evolve, as far as time scale of how the boundary layer appears to evolve. So for the discrete modes, it looks exactly how you would expect. There's a lot of CAPE really early, you're gonna convect, The linear systems, it's more kind of in the middle, it's a few hours ahead of time. That also makes some sense, since it's mostly forced from the frontal system coming in. So now this is on a few hours time scale when the boundary layer really starts to evolve. But for the mixed modes, some of the time scales of these changes in the boundary layer seem to be very small. Like we're talking like 2 hours or less, where you get these really, really rapid changes in boundary layer features. And these are showing up in the statistics. So it must be very common. So that's what we're now looking at and trying to understand why that's happening and what that means. And I would like to just mention quickly that an undergraduate student that just graduated, his name is Tyler Pardun. He's been leading that effort, and he was an undergraduate. He was doing this. He's done excellent work on that.
So talk about some of the new developments that we have to look forward to in the near future.
So
in that regard.
Our program is growing as far as observations here at NSSL and with our partners at the University of Oklahoma. So I mentioned we have 2 clamp systems. We have learned that a 22-foot trailer is mobile, but it is not nimble. And I shouldn't say we've learned that, we've known that for a long time, but this is just where we started. And so we wanted to become more nimble so that we could get into some different places with some of our instruments. And so we have recently developed a mobile Lidar system, so Lidar only, so we're only looking at the wind, that's in the back of a pickup truck. And we actually have 2 Lidars in there. So what that means is we can stare vertically all the time, so 1.5 second resolution on vertical velocity, and we can scan all the time, and so 30-second updates on horizontal wind. So you can imagine that if you're sitting right in front of storms you can get a new photograph every 30 seconds. That's very exciting for some people. So we are able to do that, and it's on a pickup truck based system, so we can move anywhere very fast. Another new update is we're really starting to work on integrating unpiloted aircraft into our operations. And that's pretty exciting because it's able to, one, improve our thermodynamic profiling, and then also just help us, again, be more nimble, because since our pickup truck is wind only, we don't have thermodynamics with that. So if we can take an unpiloted aircraft with us, we can get thermodynamics from this. So we're looking forward to growing more.
Now, you've talked about field work here a lot tonight, but you've done some work in diversity and inclusion. Talk about some of the barriers for some people to field work.
Absolutely. So in a lot of the field work that I've done, I am often the only person that looks like me that is in any of the decision-making rooms, meaning that I'm the only woman at all, and or I might be the only young person at all. So I'm about to be 30. So, you know, it is what it is. But what that means is that it's not always a very welcoming space for anyone that looks even different than me. And I've talked with students in particular about this, and it's very much perceived as the door is closed because of this. It's very much, for lack of a better term, you know, an old boys club in the severe weather, you know, fieldwork community. It feels that way. The perception is that way. That has not been my experience. Thankfully, I've not had a negative experience with those people. But this is something that we need to address. And, you know, so far in our career as a field, it really has been dominated by white men in the field. That's all that's there. And so how do we make field work more accessible and inviting to other people? I unfortunately had to have some conversations with, you know, people that are superior to me about the fact that, you know, restroom needs might be different for women than they are for men when you're in, you know, the western panhandle of Texas, where there's not even a ditch or a tree for the next 30 miles. You know, that's just something you have to consider when you have, you know, mixed groups of people. This is just different. You know, religious diversity, you know, we have to start thinking about field schedules a little bit differently. How do we build flexibility into our schedules? At least at some point, how do we build flexibility into our schedules? When we start working in very different parts of the country, how do we prepare our field teams to work safely and, you know, be comfortable in parts of the country that they've never been, and where there's no one that looks like them in those parts of the country? You know, how do we do those things? And I've been fortunate that I've been able to have these conversations with what has been perceived as the old boys club, and they have been very, very open to them. But those answers aren't easy. You know, it sounds easy. It's like, oh, well, just, you know, open the door and let people in. But there's a lot of work to be done to actually remove those barriers. So we have a lot of work to do. One of the other barriers that we're really, really talking about and trying to figure out is, you know, a barrier about literal accessibility. So, you know, people with different physical abilities. How do we, you know, make field work accessible to people of all abilities? Because right now it's just not. It's just not. And field work is my favorite part of my job, and field work is what really keeps me grounded in my work and reminds me why we do this work. And, you know, you get out from behind the desk and you go out there and you do the thing, and you collect the data and you get to see it, and you just get to see the sky and the land and feel the wind and, you know, do all of those things. And it's just like a really, really invigorating experience. And I want anybody that wants that experience to be able to have it and not be scared to have it just because nobody looks like them.
Dr. Smith, you've accomplished a lot in a very short period of time. And I think Jen's like, wait a minute, we haven't even talked about the main reason we're here to talk about tonight. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I got
to ask me, who's the biggest knucklehead out there at NSSL? I mean, there's always one clown, one knucklehead You know, who is it? I mean, and I know most of these guys, so I would love to know your opinion.
I mean, there are lots of knuckleheads. I mean, I can't even tell you.
Oh, that's a cop
Depends
out.
on the day. It depends on the
Cop
day.
out.
It depends on the day.
Okay.
So what are any other cool things you're working on that we haven't covered, Dr. Smith? I know we've covered a bunch, but anything else you want to throw out there before we talk about the museum?
I don't know. There are just so many. There are so many.
you know, James, you always talk about these young people and you know what they're doing and amazing things. This is just another example of it.
No, listen, you know, if you've ever heard me speak at one of these conferences, what's the first thing I typically say? You know, don't you dare talk ugly about the next generation. I think they're brilliant. They are the hardest working, brilliant people I've ever encountered. They're so much better than my generation. And all of these old farts, you know, these old guys, they're lazy. And no, they're not. They're not. And this is just an example of that. So I state my case right here.
Mm-hmm. This is our field example right here. So Elizabeth, we wanted you to come and talk about the museum tonight, which I didn't know anything about. I think it's pretty fascinating. Talk about what it is and how it came to be.
Absolutely. So when I'm not working at NSSL, I spend my free time putting on my hat as vice chair here at the National Weather Museum and Science Center. So this is a museum that exists, you know, brick and mortar here in Norman, Oklahoma. So if you're ever passing through or if you live in the nearby radius, please come see us. We're open by reservation right now. And in the future, we hope to be open regular hours again. But the reservation system, people do love it. So definitely come see us, and there's a lot to see. We're a hidden gem. But the museum, our mission here is to preserve the history of meteorology and also tell the story of the future of meteorology. You know, our science is young, but a lot has happened in meteorology, you know, in the time that we've been here. And this place is intentional about telling that story and preserving those pieces before they're just sent away, you know, to scrap. And so there's some amazing stories told here, and it's very exciting to get the, you know, really the honor to be one of the people to tell it. We've unfortunately had some, you know, losses in the past couple years, but when I first started volunteering here, it was very, very incredible, you know, as a younger person to get to rub shoulders with some of the people that were, you know, bringing in the artifacts and, you know, telling their stories. And, you know, they're the people that did this stuff. You know, it's amazing. So one of our exhibits is the original Norman Doppler radar, which was the prototype for the WSR 88D network that we all kind of sometimes take for granted. You know, that's all across the country now. It is your radar network. They were the ones that hand wired the thing. And they're like, oh yeah, I put this in. And they're showing me their work on the literal printouts of the radar screens, like, you know, it's paper printouts, that's what they had. This was all analog. And they're like, yeah, I had to contour this for this store, but this is crazy. Like our science is so young that this is what we do at this museum, is we tell that person's story of what they were doing. And it's just such a pleasure to be able to do that. And so if you love meteorology, this is the place for you, because we are committed to doing that stuff. So please, like, go check out our website. It's nationalweathermuseum.com. Check us out. You can become a member. We are completely supported by membership and donations. We, like, nobody's on payroll. We are all volunteers. And, you know, it's been a hard year, but we made it. Unfortunately, you know, our founder, Doug Forsyth, who was one of those people working on that Doppler radar, you know, he passed away last year. And so not only do I love it, but we all now feel very compelled to be sure that his dream, you know, makes it. And so for all of those, you know, those of you that maybe, you know, don't always think about the fact that your story has to be preserved, you know, maybe take a moment and think about who's saving those records, you know, who's doing that work, and check it out, become a member. do all of that good stuff. You can donate, do all that. Also, you can check out our podcast. I run the podcast. It's pretty cool. It's on the website too. But we have a lot of cool exhibits, and I'm happy to share all kinds of stuff about those. But I could just talk forever about how awesome this mission is. So I don't want to get too off the rails on that.
Well, you position yourself really well there to, show that there are some outstanding exhibits in the museum. What are some of the other ones that you're really excited about?
So the most amazing exhibit we have here is the T-28 Trojan aircraft. So that is the storm penetrating aircraft, the only aircraft that was designed specifically for thunderstorm penetration. So very different mission than the Hurricane Hunters. So this was like for hail penetration. So it's a T-28, so trainer aircraft that was completely repurposed and refitted in order to take very large hail while in the air. We have a podcast episode with the pilot that just came out last week or 2 weeks ago. Very much encourage you to check it out. He tells some pretty intense stories, but we have the entire aircraft, here on display. And the aircraft kind of itself has a harrowing story of its retirement and how it almost was sent for scrap, and how we were able to, kind of pull it out of the weeds and get it back here and make sure that it was here in order to tell its story. It's been struck by lightning, it's been hit by some giant hail, but it collected some of the most critical data out there for us to understand some of the stuff about how lightning charge develops in storms. And that research was done with data collected on this aircraft, which we have on display here. And
James, I bet Dr.
because
John
we wanted
Scala
to be
flew in
sure
that
to
plane
get
during his hail research.
I think he
pieces that we
probably
didn't have
did.
for the aircraft, we have second. But
I think we
have
got to put a few more quarters in
Slowly-
Elizabeth's internet.
Slowly
Yeah.
losing Elizabeth's
That we put
bandwidth. Yeah.
all the other.
Hey, Elizabeth,
Am
if
I
you can
back?
hear us, your bandwidth is starting to fade. I don't know if you can get the hamster to run a little faster or not.
Am I
That's
back
what we.
yet?
That's what we do here. Is the hamster goes faster, you get more bandwidth.
Yes.
Try it again. Go.
Okay. Am I back?
I think you're back.
Okay. Well, anyway, we have a second T-28 that we bought to salvage parts that we didn't have for this one. And once we finished salvaging the parts, we turned that second T-28 into a completely functioning and well-wired flight simulator. And we have it programmed such that if you so choose, you can try your hand at flying a very realistic T-28 aircraft into thunderstorm situations and see if you can make it out.
Oh my goodness. James,
but
does
it's-
Nate Johnson know about this?
Yeah,
I don't think so. We need to get him out there.
That would be
absolutely.
awesome for a pilot to get that opportunity.
We lose them. Yeah, if we just so we're across the street from Westheimer Airport here, and so sometimes we get just a stray pilot come in to see what's going on here, and if we let them in the simulator before they get to see anything else, they're gone. We can't get them to anything else in the whole museum. So that one is one of the most amazing exhibits. We love showing that one off because it is truly like tangible history that we were able to get our hands on to save, and also is foundational to a lot of the science that's been done.
Now, you mentioned Mr. Forsyth, Elizabeth. Talk about him and his being a driving force behind the museum and what influence he had. And I assume Russ is his son. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Ross is his son, and our other executive director, Holly, is his daughter. So Ross and Holly have stepped forward, and they are not meteorologists, by the way. They have stepped forward to just keep their father's dream alive. And so they're doing the hard work every day, the work of accounting and fundraising, that kind of stuff. And those of us on the board are doing the weather things, trying to support them as much as we can. But Doug was a radar guy, and was just a great guy. And he saw the significance in preserving all of this history that was here in Norman, because there's so much history here in Norman. And he was part of the team that was responsible for, making sure that the National Weather Center here in Norman, when it was built and all the teams came together in one building, that it was kind of set up in a good way and all of these things. And so, I think that seeing all of that and seeing all those places move meant that there were a lot of extra records and things that were going to have to get moved. And so the first step was a mobile museum. And so we have a mobile museum, which is a big fifth wheel trailer. It's very, very nice. And we do have a lot of exhibits in there that we can take to schools or to events and things like that. And for a long time, that was the museum. And Doug was acquiring a lot of extra parts and things, exhibits. He had the Doppler already that he was just keeping in some storage unit somewhere because he just had this dream. And then one day he finally got up enough support from some generous folks in the community to get a brick and mortar space. And we have rapidly outpaced this brick and mortar space. So it's not easy to fit an airplane in a room, any room. We also have a full-size vehicle that has been crushed in the 2013 Moore tornado in the same room. So we are full. All of this was Doug's dream. Doug already had an entire vision for the next phase. And I can't even describe it in a way to do justice. He has the full sketches. It would have full immersive experiences of like the cockpits of the hurricane hunters and all like a radar truck experience and all of these types of things. He already had all of these things dreamed up and put together and during his retirement. This was his retirement. And all he wanted to do was just share all of this with the community because he thinks that it's just that important to tell these stories. And that there are so many people, meteorologists and non-meteorologists alike, that appreciate these stories and these lessons. Because they're beneficial to both. We could get general members of the public coming in all the time, learning new things and being appreciative of how much work has gone into the product that they are delivered today. And the life-saving mechanisms that are in place today, what they've come from. We have like the prior technology that was used to put out messaging from the Weather Service. Like we have old teletypes, for example, and we talk about how teletype was done, and people are like, "Oh my God, warnings went out on teletype."
And making you feel old, Span.
Yeah, no. We got to call time out here. What's that creepy noise that keeps coming on in there? What is that thing?
That's the Doppler radar turning on and off.
Yeah.
Massive AC.
Oh, it's the air conditioner. I thought it was an exhibit. Okay, never mind.
I mean, your board is extremely impressive. When you go and look at the board, I mean, you have a weather who's who there. So
Yes.
there are big things coming in the future for this installation.
Yes. We're trying our best to, make sure that the vision is true to the story of meteorology. We are the real folks here putting it together. We just always need the support of the community at large. So go online, donate, become a member, and come visit us. It's so cool. Come see us.
Everybody will be right up the street in Tulsa at the NWA. They can just some of them might even be flying into OKC. Maybe they can come and see it when they stop by.
Come see us.
All right, James, man, I didn't know that we could talk an hour and 15 minutes, but it looks like we've done it. So what's the burning question? You've already asked your tough question of the night. What's the burning questions you haven't asked yet tonight?
No. So you have a very interesting story, your professional development. So let's say that a high school student is listening to this, want to get into meteorology. They really don't know what they want to do. They love weather, but they don't want to know if they're going to do television or work for NOAA or, be a practitioner. You do research. You want to get a PhD. Well, what's your advice to it, like a high school student, since you say you turn in 30-ish? I mean, you're in a good position to give some advice here. So go, give it.
Yeah, I don't think you have to know. Really, I think that, if you're a high school student and you want to get into meteorology, but you don't know what you want to do yet, go on, take some of those classes and try those things out and find out which ones fit. Because until you try them, you're not going to know for sure if you're truly interested in all of them. I was truly interested in all of them, and I tried them out and found out which ones fit and which ones didn't. And so, just go. Curiosity is amazing, and keep it and go try them out. And sometimes you can do both. There are people that do multiple of those things, and that's also incredible.
And I'm from rural South Alabama, where, you wind up working at Bo's Tire Barn for the rest of your life, and you have these dreams and aspirations, but you think you really can't get out of there because only these big city slickers, these folks that have all these resources and money are able to do this. Again, you're from West Virginia. You can do this, right? I mean, it's not just exclusively for high-income families that have a lot of resources. You can make it happen even if you come from the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely. There are more and more resources becoming available. The problem now is oftentimes folks don't actually know about the resources that are available. And, I think all of us have some more responsibility to share some of that information. And, so I would tell folks in that situation to really, really, start exploring your resources. Go to your local library and ask about resources, because even if you don't have those, so let's say that you want to learn about coding, but you don't have the, accessible, computer to do it, are there local grant programs that can get you in? For example, in downtown Charleston, West Virginia, they ran this really awesome program to take in like coal miners and teach them to code, but people didn't know about it. So, start learning about those resources. If you have, the push to do it, start asking, because the worst thing that can happen is people will just say, I don't know, I'm not sure. But if they see, dreams in you, someone is going to help you find those resources, because they're out there, and you can get there. It doesn't matter where you come from. With just a little bit of resources, once you get going, you can really, really start to find those allies that can support you.
Yeah, I tell kids all the time, you have to follow your passion. You have to. And while you do that, you've got to work harder than anybody else. You've got to. That work ethic is how I got through this and how most people can get through that. So anyway, but we've got to take a quick break here because we have to bring in Tony Rice, our local astronomy expert. We're going to have Jen with This Week in Tornado History. We will come back with Weather Roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
A few hours ago, the Earth reached aphelion, the furthest point from the sun. Yes, this happens during the summer, and no, that's not weird. Earth's seasons are, of course, the product of its axial tilt, namely how much sunlight is both more directly received and the fact that the sun spends more time above the horizon during the summer months. Plus, those shorter nights provide less time for all the stored heat to radiate back out into space, so warmer temperatures. But it doesn't mean that the 3.1 million mile variance between today's aphelion and perihelion on January 4th, when Earth will be at its closest to the sun, have no effect on Earth's climate and weather. If you do the math, that's the inverse square root of the distance between a planet and its sun, for those playing at home. And Phil Platt, better known as Bad Astronomer, did just that. All things being equal, the difference between perihelion and aphelion should produce a reduction in temperature by about 5 degrees Celsius. And it does. Just don't notice it, because all things are not equal. That math worked great for planets with no axial tilt, and that's definitely not Earth, where we see a lot greater than 5-degree differences between winter and summer temperatures because we have, well, seasons. The greatest impact that changing sun-Earth distance has is on the length of those seasons. You see, the further we are away from the sun, the slower the Earth moves in its yearly trip around. We're right now moving more than 2,000 miles an hour slower than we will in January. That means that the trip between the summer solstice and autumnal equinox takes nearly 5 days longer than the one between the winter solstice and vernal equinox. And that makes for a longer summer. Yes, the seasons are opposite in the southern hemisphere, which does receive more energy during summer months. But because 80% of the southern hemisphere is covered with water compared to 60% in the northern hemisphere, and water has a greater heat capacity, which increases the amount of energy required to raise its temperature, all this kind of climatologically evens out. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, July 10th, 1989. 17 tornadoes occurred across parts of the Northeast. 2 were given a rating of F4. For Thomas Grzoulis from Significant Tornadoes and also storm data, one of the F4s was more than likely a part of a family of tornadoes that hit parts of eastern New York State. The second F4 slammed into New Haven County, Connecticut. For the Storm Prediction Center, there have only been 2 recorded F4 tornadoes in the state of Connecticut since records began in 1950. This F4 tornado on July 10, 1989, developed in Hamden, devastating the Highwood area. Close to 350 homes and 40 businesses were destroyed. The tornado moved along a skipping path and ended just north of New Haven. Over 30 streets were blocked by fallen trees. For Thomas Grzoulis, tree damage was still being cleared a year after the tornado. There were no fatalities from this tornado event and 40 injuries. We have more details about this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
And Jen, I drove through a famous town today in Maryland tornado history, and I bet you're going to know what I'm thinking before I even say it. But La Plata,
oh, big
Maryland.
time.
Yeah. And Bruce Jones, our friend, is with us tonight for the last time for the summer. We didn't get to have him last week, but Bruce, you remember that tornado in the early 2000s? It was rated an F4. They thought for a while, or I guess it still an F4 back then. That there was a chance that it might have actually been an F5 until they looked at it a little more closely. So I was in my own situation Thursday night in our nation's capital at the hotel. Came out. The Weather Service in Sterling issued a flash flood warning prior to some storms moving into the district. I was staying downtown, and then lo and behold, I'm in the middle of a tornado warning. And so suddenly all over the restaurant, people's cell phones start going off. So, I picked it up, looked, saw we were right square where the tornado was coming. I mean, we were right in the dead center. So I went up to the manager and just said, "Hey, do you have a tornado plan?" And they said, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You're in a tornado warning. And there's a tornado in Georgetown that's coming this way." And they looked at me like I was from Mars. And so I went back up to my room, and I mean, I should have taken video of it because it looked like your pick of the week, Jen, tonight from Bruton. The window in my hotel room was actually buckling in, and there were 2 tornadoes in the district, Thursday night. And so that's about as close as I've come to being in a tornado here recently. But Bruce, we couldn't have you last week. You were busy with family
in Vegas. Yeah.
In Vegas, okay. I wanted to say Vegas in case you're going out there on a big gambling junket or something. But
no, my daughter was in a volleyball tournament out there, so we were in Vegas. But while I was there, I checked in with the National Weather Service office in Las Vegas. They're testing partial county alerting on the NOAA Weather Radio, where you subdivide your county into smaller sections so that we can get rid of this overwarning issue. And I was told that the test is going very, very well. They did have a flash flood warning while I was out there, and they minimized, instead of sending out a flash flood warning for all of Clark County, they minimized the area under the warning by using partial county alerting. And if this test continues successfully, National Weather Service is going to roll this out nationwide probably next year, allowing the National Weather Service and county emergency managers to get together and decide if and how they would like to subdivide certain problematic counties, especially the big ones.
Yeah, that's going to be Jefferson County, Alabama, I bet, James, man, wouldn't you bet?
Yeah, this is kind of big news. I mean, goodness gracious, that's a long time coming. That's awesome.
It is, James. Yeah, it's been.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, Bruce. But in Virginia, there are lots of numerous towns that are mentioned in the warning process. Is each one of those towns its own zone, or its
It could
own?
be.
Okay.
Yeah, St. Louis City and St. Louis County in Missouri are two separate SAME codes. So if you live in the actual city limits of St. Louis City proper, you put in one SAME code. And if you live in St. Louis County, which incorporates a lot of different smaller communities, then you put in a different SAME code. So I'm really looking forward to this. As James mentioned, this is long overdue. Not sure why it wasn't implemented a long time ago, but it doesn't matter. They're going to implement it. It'll be written into the code in the AWIPS2 workstations at every weather forecast office. So any office that wants to subdivide a county just needs to get together with that county emergency manager. We're already working on some tutorials on how you can reset that first digit on your SAME code. It's actually very easy to do. And hopefully in the future, that'll make NOAA weather radio a little less bothersome, in that you won't get a warning for just the entire county. You can tell it. I only want to hear warnings for the northwest corner of my county and take it from there.
Well, NOAA weather radio is still the backbone of any severe weather plan, Bruce.
It is.
And you got a special offer for our listeners, and then I've got a question from one of those listeners for you.
Okay. Yeah. If you're a listener of WeatherBrains, we appreciate that. And if you'll go to midlandusa.com, which is the Midland website, you can use a promo code. The promo code is SPANN25, SPANN 25, SPANN25 is the promo code. And basically that gives you 25% off any weather radio or weather radio accessory. So you can use an emergency crank radio like the one I have in my hand because I'm down here in Venice, Florida tonight. Or you can get a desktop weather radio like the WR120. And it's that desktop radio that allows you to put in an SAME code just for your county. It's the desktop radio that hopefully next year you'll be able to partially subdivide your county into portions and reduce your overwarning with that white desktop weather radio. It's capable of doing that right now. We just need National Weather Service to decide with the county emergency managers, A, does this county create a problem that needs to be solved by subdivision? And if so, how are we going to subdivide the county? So SPAN25 is the promo code at midlandusa.com. Yes, I'm coming to you tonight from Venice, Florida. Yes, I'm in evacuation zone A, which is the worst of the bunch. And yes, I have my weather radio. Interestingly, my youngest daughter has received a couple of WEA alerts, but my wife, my oldest daughter, and I have not received any WEA alerts yet on our phones. We're under a storm surge warning and tropical storm warning in this county.
I was shocked at how many different sounds went off in the restaurant by carrier, because it was pretty obvious. Some of them were pretty quick.
Yeah.
And some of them were much, much later. I was kind of surprised at seeing that example as it was working. So
you know what?
Weird.
What I like about it, Bill, is I like the fact that the sound is very strange. It's obviously something completely different coming from your phone. And that was a very smart thing to do, to make it such a completely different sound that you cannot ignore that sound when it comes out of your phone. Good job.
Yeah, it really
Whoever
was. And Bruce, one of our the friends of the podcast, Rob Strecker, wanted to ask a question. Can he hook up his WR400 to stream online, but still have it alert him in case there's an alert that comes in? Now that may be like stump the band tonight. He may be asking for something that's way over the rainbow here. But what help do we give Rob?
I think he can, because I believe, and it's been a couple of years since I worked with the folks who were streaming. I think you take the feed out of the headphone jack. And so that's your feed going down the internet. So everything else that comes out of the radio should continue to at least alert you with the alert tone and the lights lighting up on the display. But he can email me. Rob, email me, and I'll let our engineers give you the official answer from the engineering department. How's that?
Straight from the horse's mouth. Thank you, Bruce.
All right, so let's just kind of flow into the weather roundup with Bruce. You're in the midst of a tropical storm warning and a storm surge warning with Elsa.
And he's excited.
What,
you can tell he's excited.
Yeah. What's the mood? I mean, are people, well, tell me about the social side of this. Do people care? Are they interested? Are they doing anything? Are they just going to have a normal day tomorrow? What's the mood there?
James, I don't know if I was just out of the loop today. I mean, I had the kids down at the beach earlier this morning. It was beautiful, by the way. But I haven't seen anybody doing anything around this little neighborhood that I'm in. I put some plastic over some air circulation windows in the garage. I tied down the furniture out on the deck. I've got it all bungee corded real strong. But my wife thinks I'm overreacting to this, and she thinks I'm crazy to be doing this. And I've got my evacuation center. I've got the address here. I've got the directions for how to drive to the evacuation center if that's necessary. And there is a tornado shelter about 100 yards from me. So I've got tornado shelter, but in case of the storm surge, I think we got to get out of here. We're in evacuation zone A in Venice, Florida.
So what's the surge there? 2 to 4 feet, Bruce?
Yep. They're saying the latest is up to 2 feet above ground level. And honestly, I bet, James, that I'm at 1 foot above sea level. I mean, we're right here on the waterway. So yeah, I'm kind of concerned, to be honest. I'm a tornado guy. Haven't been through a tropical storm yet. So I'm signed up for Sarasota County alerts, City of Venice alerts. I'm watching my good friend Steve Jervey on TV and just trying to use as much information as I can.
There you go. Well, let us know how it goes tomorrow. You're now within range where you can see it on the Key West radar. So, we're in that interesting phase of this. I'm a little worried about the tornado potential on that side in the peninsula there. Inevitably there are going to be a few, and SPC kind of ramped up the wording a little bit in the midday update today. So we'll have the tornado threat, we'll have the storm surge issue, and we'll have, obviously some heavy rain. So we'll see. Obviously it's not going to be, a red letter day. This is not going to go down in history, but tropical storms can produce more problems than you might expect, especially if they stall. But the good news, this one at least should be moving on. So take some pictures, Bruce.
Will do.
So let's see here, Jen. You're not going to deal with this. What's you're heating up now that your 50s are gone, huh?
That's right. Eating up a little bit, but not too bad here. Dry. We had a little rain with the front, but then we've dried out again. So then we have another front coming in midweek, but just kind of a typical, central Ohio summer. A little up and down with the temperatures, and just trying to decide if I turn my air conditioning on or off. And that's about it. So yeah, just nothing really major here. And I don't have a lot of radio clients. We talked about that in the pre-show. Tallahassee is the only one that's closest to me that I'm watching for tonight. I'm going to update them soon with the 11 o'clock update on if the path changes at all, but they're on the edge of the cone. So hopefully the things will be good there.
Down here in the deep south, Bill, we've hit 90 only 5 times since June 1st, which is remarkable. We saw people bundled up in blankets watching fireworks displays, and it looks like temperatures are going to stay below average down here for a while. So we did good. I mean, I don't want to brag because August is coming and September is coming. In fact, the last time we hit 100 down here, Bill, was in what month? Remember?
I'm going to say, I'll say September, but it might have been October,
October 3rd of 2019. That was the last day we hit 100 here. So that's a sign we can have that kind of heat into early October. So I don't like to brag, but I'll just say we are enjoying the cooler than average, mild summer so far. So let's go out to Elizabeth.
This tropical cyclone is a real good example of how being out of the cone doesn't mean you're out of the impact zone. And so, we got to remember that all of, the Florida Peninsula is going to be affected by this thing. And so that's a very important lesson. Just being out of the cone doesn't get you out of the woods.
Mm-mm.
Exactly. So Elizabeth, wait, do you know Kim Cloco McLean? Do you know Dr. Cloco McLean by any chance?
I do, yes.
Where is Kim? She ran from you. I mean, she's not on the same show here. I don't know what happened. Are y'all having a fight? Are y'all having a fight or what here? I mean,
Let's find out. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm at an SSL. She's at the Cooperative Institute. Maybe we just can't be in the same call at the same time today. I'm not sure.
I guess some kind of a contractual thing. So what's the weather like in Norman?
Well, we're happy to be coming out of the torrential rains from last week. I tell you that. So my backyard's been a standing, lake for the past 4 days. So that's nice. But pretty mild temperatures for the next week. So that's always a blessing for Oklahoma in July. So upper 80s, maybe a few 90s. But I'm just hoping for dew points under 70. That's all I'm hoping for. So I've got some field work lined up for the week, and I would like it to not be. But with all this water in the ground, I don't think I will be so lucky.
Let me tell you, we actually had dew points in the 40s here at one point Saturday afternoon. I mean,
wow.
Goodness gracious, that just doesn't happen down here. We're used to 75-degree dew points this time of the year. So it has been awfully nice. All right, Aubrey, I see you're back. We might have an email. Do you got a second by any chance?
Sure. I think I
well,
saw
if you got a second,
there.
you got the dime, I got the time. Dive into the email inbox and see if anything happens to be there.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, this first one comes in tonight from the Central Alabama Weather Authority. Hey, Span, do you think Tornado Alley is shifting? Some Mets say it is, others say it isn't. What do you think?
Well, didn't we have Victor Gincini on the show here with Harold to talk about their paper? This was a Brooks Gincini research paper on how the tornado occurrences tend to be increasing in the southern part of the country and decreasing out in the Great Plains. So we've talked about that. We need what show is that, Bill? We need to dig the episode number. Whatever. Look at Victor's.
Have to dig that up.
Yeah, look at Victor and Harold's paper, which was very well done. It's very interesting, and I think they did some great work. So I will defer to Dr. Brooks. Elizabeth, do you know Dr. Brooks out there by any chance?
I do. His office is, I think, 4 or 5 offices down from mine.
And you did not name him as a knucklehead, so there you go. I mean, in fact, Harold was on this show last week, wasn't he?
Yeah, I was going to say,
I missed Dr. Brooks.
he was great last week. We had a ball with Harold. It's always great having him on the show. So. All right. So anyway, I would refer him to the Gincini Brooks paper.
Refer to the Gincini Brooks paper. Got it. All right. Next one comes in from Rob Strucker. Is there any way? I believe this is for Bruce. Is there any way I can hook up?
And he's already
he's already answered it. Okay, perfect. I missed that. Perfect. And I think that is all the new emails I have. So email at weatherbrains.com if you would like to send us maybe a cool link you spotted, something interesting, or if you have a question for us or one of our guests, or if you have a guest suggestion, don't forget to send in contact information, email at weatherbrains.com. Love to hear from you.
Now, Elizabeth will warn you, we're going to have a pick of the week we'll need from you here in a couple of minutes. So something weather related. It can be the museum if you want, but if you want to be more creative, whatever. Just anyway, we'll hit you last. So this is where we go around the horn and share a pick of the week, something that has something to do with weather. So Jen, let's start with you. I kind of like your pick because I saw that video.
Yeah, very good video here. Interesting, but it proves the point, as you just said, James, that even tropical storms can cause issues, and we do have a concern as Elsa makes its way closer to Florida. We could have tornadoes, but this is security camera footage from Tropical Storm Claudette, a tornado that was spawned from that system in East Bruton, Alabama. It was rated EF2, and this was back on June 19th. And so this is security camera footage of that as it roared on through. So this is always a threat when you have a landfalling tropical system. You could have tornadoes. And speaking of tornadoes, I think I found the WeatherBrains episode, which I just closed it. Dang it. Well, let me open it. 692. The Mafia in St. Louis was the name of it. But it was April 22nd, 2019.
Okay, there you go. So that's the Victor and Harold show. That was a
Yep.
good one. All right.
Yep.
So mine, it's the, this is the time of the year where everybody looks for tropical data, and there's a lot of great sites. And I picked the CIRA site, Connecting Models and Observations from NOAA, their tropical page, and it's really, really good. It's you pick a tropical system like Elsa, and you've got just a smorgasbord of satellite data, of derived wind data, of kinetic energy, intensity data. It's good. So if you want to, and now's a good time to try it because of Elsa. So again, that'll be my pick. And all these links will be on the show notes and the website weatherbrains.com. All right, Aubrey, you got one for us tonight?
Yes. So happy Aphelion Day. Also, this is the day when we are at our furthest point from the sun in the Earth's orbit. So it's not about the distance. It's all about the tilt.
About the tilt.
Got to get that tilt. So in honor of that, and also in honor of the first X-class flare of the new solar cycle, I am recommending a Twitter follow to Dr. Tamitha Skov, who is a space weather physicist. Not only does she have amazing tweets that are honestly very easy to understand, she puts it in layman's terms, and she'll respond to you so you get it. But she also posts some really great videos also. So for any of our space weather enthusiasts, or if you want to learn a little bit more about space weather and what's coming up, I highly recommend following her. She's fantastic.
Bill, wasn't she on the show one time?
She was. She absolutely was, and she was a very fascinating guest.
I remember she had this incredible background, and that was we need to look up that show episode. So I'm telling you, Bill Murray is the king of guest booking officers in the whole world. I mean, this guy, Bill, has gotten everybody on the show here. I mean, you name it, they've been on the show. So, but I agree, that is a very interesting follow on Twitter. All right, let's see here. Bruce, give us a pick of the week. You always got a good one.
Well, I'll have to go with something rather mundane, but it's very valuable to me. Being here in Venice, Florida, we're going to be impacted by Elsa. I guess I could say I've enjoyed National Weather Service Tampa Bay's website, and the information they're giving has been up to date and very, very good. So again, kudos and a tip of the hat to the National Weather Service, who does such a great job. And then to Ken and the group at the National Hurricane Center for doing all of the outstanding work that they do. The information flow from these folks is phenomenal, very useful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Let me tell you what, it is amazing to me, Bruce, seeing the consistency in that NHC forecast over the past, 4 days. Even back on Friday, when modeling was all over the board, you had some that recurved it east of Florida. You had some that took it up toward the Panhandle. They have been really, really good and consistent. And I appreciate what they do. Ken Graham and his team down there, they have done a marvelous job with this storm. So
you cannot bet against these guys. Do not bet against the Hurricane Center, no matter how much wish casting you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. They are really good. I say this all the time. The folks that work at SPC and the folks that work at NHC, they're like our Army Rangers, our Navy SEALs. They are the best of the best. So great work. Okay, Elizabeth, I've stalled long enough. You got to come up something good for us. So go.
Okay, I actually have two. So my first one would be Unidata has an excellent introduction to Python for meteorologists. So if anybody out there wants to get started with coding and wants to get started with coding relevant to meteorology, they have an excellent introduction to that. And my second one would be a little bit of a self-plug, but for our clamp systems, we have live data that anybody can access. And due to the pandemic, we've had a lot of canceled field projects starting later this year, actually almost now. We are going to be deployed back to back for like the next 2 years. So chances are, anytime you log into our live data viewer, you can view our data in near real time. So if you're bored, you can always check out our Doppler Lidar data or our thermodynamic profiles almost any time of day, any time of night, and hopefully we'll have a good location point on there so you can see where we are.
See, if you're a weather weenie, there's always something cool like this. I mean, there is always something cool to occupy your time. Bill Murray, we could just dream of something like this when, way back when. Not that you're old as I am, but I'm saying you lived through the teletype era.
And then the Weather Channel era. And now
the early,
you have everything at your fingertips.
People just don't understand that this phone here, you've got this thing in your pocket. It's a treasure trove. It is an absolute treasure trove. I could not even dream of this when I was a kid. So it's just too cool. All right, Bill Murray, go. You got something for us?
Yeah, well, I actually do have a pick of the week. And my first pick of the week is the drink that my wife brought me from dinner. And I guarantee this is something you've never had, James Van. It's nice and orange. Can you guess what it is? Anybody guess what it is?
Some kind of smoothie? I mean, I don't know.
Mango lassi from the Indian restaurant. So I knew you would be ready to run out and get you one of those after the show's over tonight. But James, next week we have meteorologists from Spire. Remember we talked about radio occultation several months ago, and whether that was how big a thing that really is, but they're going to come on and talk about that next week. And I'm really excited that in 2 weeks we will have the famous Bill Curtis, the Bill Curtis, thanks to Jen reaching out to him. And we're going to turn it into an episode of Wait, Don't Tell Me, the WeatherBrains edition. It'll be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to that. So that's
the deal that we've got to get him to do a liner or two for the show, like he did for Anchorman. I mean, this is the narrator guy for Anchorman, the movie. I mean, we've got to get him to do some liners here.
And my pick of the week is our own website, the weatherbrains.com. If you'll go there now, you can find each and every one of the 9 years of Professor Peters' WeatherBrains 101 segments. Rob Strecker, who we referred to earlier with the question to Bruce, has pulled all of those out of the shows, listed the subject, and then Scott Martin of our team has taken it and put all of that on the main menu at the very top. You'll see it right there, Professor Peters' WeatherBrains 101s, and they're really, really good. So if you have some time to kill, go back and listen to those. There's literally hundreds of them, James. Be a great listen for sure.
It's awesome. Did I forget anybody here? I think we covered everybody. If I did
not,
I thought
you were going to forget me, because I like
raise you. Usually I forget somebody. No, I had my finger on the trigger here. I mean, I was ready.
I like to fool you that way.
So, you know what I got to do tomorrow? For the first time since March of 2020, I'm speaking in public. I don't know if I remember how to do this. I'm speaking to a senior adult group in Anniston, Alabama, and it has been so long. I mean, I've done a gazillion of these Zoom things, but it's not the same as looking at people. Now, third graders, I got that. I mean, I got that stuff. I've got to. I don't know, but I will do my best to make that work. But here's the deal. If you're new, we typically do the show every Monday night at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. You can watch it at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. But we know that most of you listen to this show, and we thank you for that. If you want to send us an email, get on Aubrey's email segment. The email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. The picks of the week, the show notes, same site, weatherbrains.com. And hey, if you listen through Apple Podcasts, leave a comment. If you love us, great. If you hate us, great. We love those comments, though. So we'll see you guys next Monday night on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew. I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
How could anybody hate us, James?
Oh, haters are everywhere. All right, guys. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. It was great having you on the show.
Thanks a